Nandita asked me, how do we become closer as women right across the world? And we talked about it and decided that we would film each other answering this question. And this film is the result of that. We also then committed to reaching out to other women and asking them the same question and filming their answers. It's a sort of start of a sort of chain of discussions and answers to this question. After all, how do we become closer as women?
I'm a big believer of multiple identities. I believe all of us have multiple identities, and no one identity needs to take precedence over the other just because someone thrusts it on you. But I've also observed that the identity that unwittingly, takes precedence over all other identities is the identity of being a woman. I somehow feel like that always comes forth much more than any other identity. And probably because we are never allowed to forget that we are women. And if that's the case, I feel it's just natural for us to kind of, you know, get drawn towards each other or have a greater sense of empathy, or you feel like there is a shared sense of experience, shared sense of just knowing the way we know the world. And yet the narrative, at least in India, is that a woman is woman's greatest enemy. I don't even know where that comes from. Or like a mother-in-law is the biggest enemy of the daughter-in-law. And these kind of things can perpetuate this negative feeling instead of bringing a sense of sisterhood. Of course, any generalization has aberrations. So it doesn't mean that every woman that you meet you're going to bond, but there are more chances that you're going to bond than not. I did a film, Catalan, a Spanish Indian film, and it was an all women crew. It was a women director, women producer, women cinematographer, women sound, etc. And when the producer told me, I thought, well, it's important to get a lot of women together, and especially behind the camera, because there are so few of us. But is this a bit of a gimmick? Like, why do we have to say all women? Why does it have to be either? And I was curious. I did that film. One of the big reasons to do that film was I was curious to see what happens when women are really at the helm of their respective departments. And undoubtedly, there was a greater sense of empathy on set. There's just a greater sense of caring, and all those nurturing qualities that we attributed to is not just for our children, but it's for each other, and it's just for people who are around us. And I think it comes quite instinctively. And I feel it also comes because we are vulnerable. So, what is seen as a weakness is actually our strength, because we are vulnerable. I see that in myself. I sometimes feel I'm not meant to be a leader. I mean, I don't like being on the top end of the hierarchy. I don't like being bullied. I don't like being at the bottom of the hierarchy either. But I don't like being on the top either. And I wondered why, because people say, oh, the director is the captain of the ship and you've got like 150 people at your beck and call. And I'm like, that's not my trip. I don't want them at my beck and call. But it's a greater sense of responsibility, and you want to make sure you care about every person down the line.
Nandita, since we last met, I've been going round and round in my head all the things that you said. And the question that keeps on coming back to me is, do you think feminism itself isolates women?
Well, if you put it that way, it probably does. Not always. Sometimes it brings people together, women together, but sometimes it can also pull them away. Because any ism, I think, has limitations, has boundaries, is too defined. And it's only fluidity, it's ambiguity that brings people closer when they don't feel they have to fit into something, that they are being defined by someone else. And I think that's why sometimes it isolates, sometimes it creates an us and them. And the minute you have that differentiation, then it's difficult to overcome that and see the similarities that we have. So, in that sense, sometimes any ism, I would say, but yeah, sometimes feminism can become a barrier as opposed to bringing women together. My chance.
Your chance.
Let the tables be turned.
I think women get on terribly well together, and I think it's one of the great secrets. Unfortunately, I think women don't know that women get on well together, and unfortunately, I think men do know that women get on together and do everything they can to prevent it from happening. Because when we're together, we're a pretty undeniable force.
Dynamite.
That's right. Having said that, class gets in the way, and education big time gets in the way. Culture gets in the way. Your perception of motherhood gets in the way. I was always taught to live your life based on your deathbed backwards. Decide what will you be proud of on your deathbed, write it down for yourself and don't forget it. And the truth is, the only thing I'll ever be proud of on my deathbed is the quality of the relationship I have with my children, and what they're doing. So, and that distinguishes me from other women who have different ambitions and different concepts of success and happiness. And I think perceptions of motherhood divides women. And I also think faith divides women, because I think faith so often stratifies society and defines the role of women, and the role of men. And I think motherhood and faith are actually subjects that many women won't discuss. And I think I think those actually, funnily enough, they're some of the biggest divides. And they come with this laden word, compromise. Why did you make that compromise? Because of your faith, because of your motherhood role, or you're balancing motherhood and work and things like that. And very often I keep on saying, I didn't make a compromise. I made a decision. That was my decision. It wasn't a compromise.
But what about when sometimes women do or say or behave in a way that we feel is breaking this movement or is a hindrance to that movement? For instance, when there's, let's say, right-wing politics all around you, and you see women rooting for a right-wing leader, or justifying their very biased or sexist ways, or there are other women who are fleecing their husbands, or taking all the money, or doing anything that you feel we women should not be doing. How do you then explain?
I can't explain. And I think it goes back to your ism. You become clear that your own ism is the right ism. And if I gave you a silly story, one of my daughters, I remember, was saving a lot of money, and I couldn't figure out what she was saving for. She was quite young, and I finally got to the bottom of what she was saving money from. She was going to have plastic surgery, and she'd made the decision she was going to, because there was a bit of her body that she wanted to adjust. Now, if you're me, that is not what you do.
Exactly.
And it was a real awakener to me to recognize that even my own daughter has very, very different perceptions of being a woman. And I can ask myself, was that a compromise? Was that a decision? Whether, who knows? It was too complex a decision to make. Now, I would never do it. She did choose to do it. Looking at her now, she was actually completely right. She's much more at peace with her body as a result of doing this. But it did just viscerally remind me that different women do different things in different ways. And there's no rhyme or reason to it necessarily.
No, I was just saying, did it make you less judgmental of other women?
Much. Because
you sort of assume that, you know, she'll be like me. But she's not like me. I've got 3 daughters and they're all very different.
Yeah, and we expect our children to have all our values and all the stuff
absolutely.
that we are pumping them with. You know?
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And you know, really facing up to the fact that there are different versions of what it is to be a woman. It's about time, you know, I needed reminding of that. And I think as women, again, important to say, vast proportion of the time we are extraordinary at working together. But there are moments when we regard our own perception of what it is to be a woman as the benchmark, and we judge other women against us, our own benchmark, and that is a lack of cultural intelligence. In my case, in this case, it was a generational one, but it can be a cultural one, a sectoral one, a specialism one. It can be a geography one, but or faith-based one. But you know, resisting the temptation to regard yourself as the benchmark and to recognize that everybody's different and they'll have different perceptions of what it is to be a woman, and to have that as a proper conversation, and to be there when she had the plastic surgery and be as helpful and useful as a mother as I could be, even though it's not something I would have done.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. It's not a silly anecdote. It's a very telling story. And we have much to learn from it. Because we do put ourselves as the benchmark. But the more conversations we have, the more nuances we bring to our conversations, I think there is more hope of understanding each other and realizing that there are fewer reasons to judge each other than to not only accept but respect each other.